Welcome to Bags Are Juiced. I'm Jeff DeForest, along with Mike Lubitz. I know a lot of people are probably still enduring a Dilaudid drip, maybe thinking about swallowing a cap of cyanide, because the football season has come to an end. A crashing thud for those Sharpies who were backing the San Francisco 49ers. All the smart money, Lubie, was on the 49ers, except we know this. If you're a degenerate gambler, you usually want to go the other way. You don't want to defy overwhelming trends. One of which in this game, Kansas City and San Francisco, was don't ever bet against Patrick Mahomes when he's an underdog. That total is now at 13-1. So if you're suffering from a little bit of withdrawal and you're thinking, what am I going to do? It's 5 months to the next football season. I'm getting the shakes just thinking about not being able to make a wager. That's why we created Bags Are Juiced. We are here to help you and guide you through the baseball season from a betting standpoint. And the object here is strictly, as always, with anything we do, Louie, and you know this to be true, to bury your bookmaker. We want you to triumph. It's a long grind. It's a long season. There's a lot of action every night. Now, if you are thinking about betting spring training games, we want to put a Surgeon General's warning out there. You need a therapist right now. I don't like betting preseason football. A lot of people think they have an angle there. You do not. You don't know what you're doing. You're betting into the most foolish proposition that you could possibly ever conjure up. So we're not going to recommend any spring training games to you, but we do have some trends for the season. And these bets are great because you can sit back, relax, smoke a cigar, have a couple of cheeseburgers. You're in the middle of July. You're in all likelihood still not out of your proposition bets if you're making season-long bets on things like who's going to be the MVP, who's going to be the home run leader, over under totals, very popular bet on teams, and whether or not they're going to be able to achieve a certain record. And there are a lot of numbers already out there and a lot of information that you need to absorb, and still a lot to be determined before the season gets underway. Now, we do have one piece of outstanding inside information for you that I am going to guarantee is the bet of my lifetime. I'm going to make this even a loser leaves town proposition. If this doesn't hit, you get the rest of the season free, but the season will be over by then. Inside information is great, too. Well, our best piece of inside information ever, and we may have relayed this to you on the morning briefing, was when a friend of mine, we were sitting around in the Caesars Palace Sportsbook and making wagers on a Super Bowl game. I think this was, circa 2015, Lubie? You might have done some tracking on that. And I get a frantic call. I don't usually answer calls from numbers that I don't recognize because most of my friends actually pop up as scam likely. So I'm thinking, if that designation is on the phone, then good. Pick it up there, answer. Hey, Joe, don't worry. I'll have your money next week. But in this case, it was a guy that I've known for a long time, but wasn't particularly friendly with in terms of hanging out together. Guy never calls me. I don't even know how he had my number. And he's frantic. It's a few minutes before kickoff, and he says, hey, can you get a bet down for me? Can you get a bet down for me? I'm thinking, yeah, here's another neurotic schmuck that's calling me at the last second, hoping that I can put some money down for him because I just happen to be sitting here in the casino with money to bet for everybody. What am I, fucking Santa Claus? So he tells me that he had a guy that was at the rehearsal for Katy Perry who was doing the halftime show and that he knew what the first song of the halftime show was going to be. I thought, well, who cares about that? I don't know. You can wager on that? Sure enough, you couldn't wager on it at Caesar's Palace where I was, but after searching all over the globe, we finally found some guy in Guam who was willing to take the bet at 6-5 odds. So he knows for a fact, he says, that the first song is going to be a song called Roar. Now, Louie, I don't know about you, but I couldn't give you, just like with Usher last night, I couldn't give you one single song that is in the repertoire of Katy Perry. I don't know anything about what she does. I know she's very popular. She's a judge on one of the singing shows that's out there. And sure enough, he was familiar with her and had somebody at the rehearsal. He was sure she was going to not juxtapose things. She was going to introduce Roar as her opening number. And so I say, all right, I'll see if I can get something down. How much you want me to bet? 100, 200? He goes, 10,000.
Nah.
I'm like, 10,000? I'm sitting here with $10,000. Who's going to take a bet like that? So sure enough, they cap a lot of these oddball prop bets, like what color Gatorade is going to be dumped on a coach. It was purple, by the way, last night. We were wrong about that. And they cap them at like a couple of $100. You'd be lucky if you can get down 500 on something along those lines.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we managed to get down $100 on. And she comes out for the halftime show. Here's Katy Perry. And they turn the sound down in the casino at halftime because everybody's rushing back to re-up their bets people that got buried on the first half, they figure, hey, why not take another beating in the second half? So everybody's at the windows, and the tellers and the pari-mutuel clerks, whatever, the betting agents, they want to be able to hear the bets, so they turn the sound down on the TV. Here's this giant screen. Here comes Katy Perry out. She's on the back of a lion, and I'm thinking, holy shit. Either she's going to do Roar as the opening song, or she thinks she's Lafitte Pink High. I don't know. Maybe the woman had some kind of upsetting experience before the halftime show. So she ends up doing Roar. We did get paid off at 6-5 on $100. And yet that still looms as the most solid piece. There was somebody at the rehearsal. What was she going to do? She wasn't going to change it up. And so we had solid inside information. And the reason I bring this story up is because I believe that we have inside information on a season-long prop bet, an over-under total on one of the 32 teams in Major League Baseball. I think, we're going to be able to come up with that. So we'll have that for you later on in the show. In the meantime, and look at this handsome gentleman right here. We want to introduce to you on Bags Are Juiced, which is a title that's kind of a variation on a theme by a Tom Callahan book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We introduced Glenn Geffner, longtime radio play-by-play broadcaster, with San Diego, Boston Red Sox, and then we got to know him when he was play-by-play voice of the Miami Marlins, and now doing all kinds of things. He's a professor of baseball. He's got courses online, all kinds of different stuff. Great stuff that he puts out online with insight into baseball. We introduced Glenn Geffner, and Callahan wrote the book, of course. The bases were loaded, and so was I, which is one of my themes in life. Glenn, how are you, my friend? Thanks for joining us here on Bags Are Juiced.
Doing great, Defo Lubie. Good to be with you today.
Good to have you on the program. All right, we wanted to tap into your expertise, give some people some kind of guidelines as we get things rolling here for the season. Would you say that it is a form of criminal insanity, though, to be betting individual games in spring training?
Spring training, yes. I think, Defo, that may be for you and for a very small number of people. But in general, spring training baseball might be the most unpredictable thing you can imagine. So I would not be running out to place those wagers.
All right, a lot of stuff happened in the offseason. And if you're looking over the odds for who's going to be in the World Series and the eventual champion, the obvious team right now flashing up there at 3.5 to 1 is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers, of course, they got Shohei Ohtani in the offseason. They ended up getting this guy Yamamoto, who is hotly sought after, pitcher out of Japan who had a phenomenal record, earned run average, although there's no guarantee with some of these guys that they're going to come over and perform well. We've seen guys have great success like Yu Darvish and others, maybe Hideki Nomo, but then we've seen Hideki Irabu and other guys just bomb out. I don't know. What would you say? Dice K's career, what was a flame out, or did he measure up to expectations at all?
It's a great question. I was with Dice K when he first came to America, when he joined the Red Sox in 2007 and had a good year in 2007 and a great year in 2008, helped the Red Sox win a World Series in 2007. So did he accomplish all many anticipated? Maybe not, but he's got a World Series ring, and he was a big part of that team's success. So I wouldn't write him off. But you mentioned the additions in Los Angeles. They were pretty good before Yamamoto and before Ohtani also, with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and on down the line. They won a ton of games last year. They've been in the playoffs, I think, 11 straight years. They won the division 10 out of 11 years. So it would be tough to bet against the Dodgers. And yet, you know the history. When was the last time the team that won the offseason had the parade at the end of the year? It never seems to work out that way, does it?
No. Did they also sign and acquire the rights to Sadaharu O? This was an invasion of Japan like we haven't seen since Hiroshima. My God, just unreal what they've done. All right, and you make a very valid point. And the natural inclination of people is to say, oh, okay, let me try one of the other teams, because there's just no way it's not going to work out for the Los Angeles Dodgers, even though they seem to be the obvious choice on paper. So a lot of other moves were made. Well, which do you see as the most significant? I mean, you had the Orioles, who really surprised a lot of people, won just a radically tough division in the American League East last year, which looms to be difficult again. And they go out and they get Burns, which was a significant addition to their pitching staff. Who made moves that really impressed you and that you think are going to have a great impact on who eventually becomes the champion in Major League Baseball this year?
I was going to start with Corbin Burns because, as you said, the Orioles had a great year last year. They had the best record in the American League. They flamed out in the postseason, but they've got so much young talent. The one thing they didn't have was that horse atop their rotation. And in a very tough division where you've got four teams with legitimate playoff hopes in the American League East, and then you got the Red Sox bringing up the rear, it looks like, again. Burns was the one piece of the puzzle they didn't have Now they have that guy. They also have him in a contract year, so he's got a lot on the line. A lot of reasons to come up big for the Orioles here in 2024. So that was a huge move. It's hard to ignore what the Dodgers did. Dodgers have had a lot of injuries in the pitching staff. Dustin May is going to be out. Walker Buehler's coming back later in the year. Clayton Kershaw will be back until the second half of the season. So Yamamoto is a big addition for them. They brought Tyler Glasnow in as well. It's an interesting rotation to look at with the moves that they made this year. Ohtani won't be able to pitch till next year, coming off the elbow surgery again. But for me, the thing that are most interesting are the guys who haven't signed yet, and the impact that a Blake Snell can have on a race this year, that a Cody Bellinger can have on a race this year. Jordan Montgomery, who was a huge piece of the Rangers winning the World Series last year, he's still a free agent. JD Martinez, a big bat, is still out there. So with so few divisions that you look at and say, this team is a lock to win in 2024, and with so many teams on that playoff bubble, those four guys, you throw in a Jorge Soler also who's still out there, could still make a huge impact. So it's really hard for me today, Defo, to sit here and say, these are my picks, because I'd like to see where some of these final players land. The funny thing, you talk about Snell, Bellinger, Montgomery, Martinez, they're all Scott Boras clients. The big four guys still out there all have the same agent, and they're going to get paid eventually. The question is when and by whom, because that more than anything might swing some of these races.
Let's zero in on the teams in New York. Get a lot of coverage on it, and New York City still maybe the number one baseball city in terms of interest in the teams. The Yankees and the Mets, both disappointing last year. Will they be equally disappointing this year? We know the Mets pulled the plug on their grand scheme to go and spend as much money as possible. I mean, they could have brought down the national debt if they had invested in that instead of in weak pitching and players, position players that didn't come through. And there's always a question whether Cashman is going to do enough to bring the Yankees back. Do you feel any of those teams, either of those teams, will end up being a force this year?
I think the Yankees have as much pressure on them going into this season as anybody in baseball. Brian Cashman, a ton of pressure. Aaron Boone, a ton of pressure. They brought Juan Soto in for the final year of his contract. So now you have Soto and Aaron Judge hitting back-to-back in that Yankees lineup, whether it's Soto ahead of Judge or Judge ahead of Soto. Either way, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch with those two. Will they get a full, healthy season of Carlos Rodon? Will he be the pitcher they thought they were bringing in last year? You know what you have in Garrett Cole, probably the best pitcher in baseball. But there is a ton of pressure. A lot of people thought that maybe Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman might be in trouble after last year when the Yankees needed a strong finish just to get to 500 at the end of the year, 82-80. But this has got to be a year where they break through. And we already talked about the Orioles a little bit. They're not going to make it easy. The Blue Jays and Rays aren't going to make it easy in that AL East either. On the other side of New York, though, for me, it's almost like the Mets are the forgotten team this year with all the attention that was on them at this time a year ago. They still have a massive payroll. They're still up there with the Dodgers in that $300 million range. But because it came out last year when they made some of those deals at the deadline that, well, maybe they're going to punt on 2024 and look at the 2025 and beyond, I think there's still a team that can sneak up on some people this year. And I really think the Mets, with some of the pitching they brought in this offseason, with some guys who are bound to be healthier and have better years than they had last year when everything went wrong for that team, I think the Mets are a team that can still battle for a wild card spot this year. And part of that is all the attention is not going to be on them going into the season.
We always like teams in any sport that we're knocking on the door and they get close one year and maybe a little bit closer to next year. This kind of happened a little bit in reverse with the Philadelphia Phillies, who were there in the World Series, weren't able to pull it off, and came back and made it into the round before the World Series, the championship round, and they come back with a pretty strong contingent again this year. So they definitely might be worth a sniff going into the year at 14-1. I believe they are to win the championship. What division? I mean, and it's hard to overlook the Braves in any season. What division do you see being the most difficult to navigate? Because a friend of mine who's a very knowledgeable baseball guy said, hey, look at the American League East overall. You just mentioned the Yankees, and you have reason to maybe consider them as a possible champion. Baltimore Orioles improved themselves off a miraculous season with a good young team. Toronto is always the wise guy's choice. So watch out for the Blue Jays, but there's legitimacy to that. And you have the Red Sox at the bottom of the division in terms of season total predictions. And they're supposed to go 500 this year, which is pretty strong for a team that's going to be a cellar dweller in their division.
Yeah, you didn't mention Tampa Bay either.
Yeah.
Really, that division is the one that's definitely 4 teams deep. You could see 4 American League East teams qualify for the playoffs potentially. Any one of the Yankees, the Orioles, the Rays, or the Blue Jays could be in the postseason. Other divisions, particularly, you look at the American League West, you got 3 teams. I think Texas, Houston, and Seattle. And some of those current free agents could swing that division potentially. You've got the Braves and the Phillies duking it out in the National League East with the advantage to Atlanta going in if they can stay healthy. Out west, the Dodgers ought to run away with the National League West, although Arizona is a very interesting team coming off a great run in October last year. But I left out the 2 Central divisions because those 2 divisions could be as up for grabs as virtually any division we've seen in baseball in recent years. And again, if the Cubs sweep in and bring Cody Bellinger back as a free agent, that could move them to the top of the list there. But without him, you could make an argument that the Cincinnati Reds or the Pittsburgh Pirates have improved enough to be interesting in that division. The Cardinals have made some moves. They brought in significant starting pitching this offseason. It's another team where there's a lot of pressure to win in 2024. The American League Central, look at what Kansas City has done. Kansas City has spent the 4th most money in baseball this offseason. Yes. The small market, low revenue Royals. But Cleveland's taking a little bit of a step back. Looks like Minnesota might be taking a little bit of a step back. Kansas City's got a shot. Detroit is going to be better with some of their young talent coming along. They've brought some veteran guys in as well. So those 2 Central divisions are fascinating to me. And if you're talking about it from a gambling perspective, those 2 divisions that would scare me. A lot can happen in the AL Central and the NL Central this year.
Always great stuff. Now, where can people follow? You have so many different things that you're putting out there in terms of inside information of sorts, which is the feature of the show today on Major League Baseball. Where can people find your stuff, Glenn?
I have a Substack on baseball, Marlins and Major League Baseball, glengeffner.substack.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Glenn Geffner, and all my stuff ends up on Twitter one way or another.
Hope you'll be a regular throughout the season here on Bags Are Juiced, and thanks so much for joining us, my friend.
Great talking with you guys.
Thanks, all right, it's kind of a beauty contest here. We got the very handsome Glenn Geffner in joining us right now. Talk about a guy that's out to make some money, and that's what we want to do here. It's all about the fabulous moolah. No reference to the famed wrestler that went by that same tag. We welcome to the show and world-renowned handicapper. Guy's a great guy as well. Mr. Mike Jones joins us here on the program. Michael, how are you, my friend?
Pleasure to be with you, gentlemen.
Good to have you on the program. Now, are you working, moonlighting as a lawyer? You look like you got a shot Alan Dershowitz or something
I'm
there.
trying to read all books possible, even especially reading about the NL and AL Central, as Glenn just referenced to.
All right, very good. A general overview we got from Glenn Geffner. A lot of interesting stuff. I mean, still a lot to be decided. I don't know that it's all going to be ironed out in the next week or so, especially with those high-profile free agents that are available. Everybody was looking for Bellinger to get a bat in the lineup. This guy resurrected his career like Lazarus from the grave. Montgomery, was outstanding last year on the mound. The Yankees probably regretting that they let him go. J.D. Martinez, we know, can swing a very effective power bat and also be consistent where he's not one of these guys that just strikes out or hits a home run. And, so there are a lot of prospects. Blake Snell, of course, Cy Young Award winner. So would be of great value to some pitching staff. I mean, you can't have enough pitching. But much to be decided. Just a general look at things that you've been kind of considering in terms of season-long preseason wagers.
It's early February. We're just getting started. Season begins, end of March. I think in a few weeks we come back to you. I think we'll have a real handle on where we think the season's going to head. I think right now you kind of look at the stacked teams and get your vibe, how good they're going to be. But I believe that there's some of the little teams that we always see that what's going to happen, how the preseason goes and who develops and what happens and what's projected starters and so on. Again, I go like what we talked about, the Dodgers, Orioles, Yankees, all the solid teams are going to be there. But I think it's still pretty much wide open. And like you said, the free agents come in. I hear that Snell might be linked to the Giants, which would give the Giants a little boost in the West. Probably a big, long chase to get to Los Angeles. But, there's still a lot to happen before we make real decisions on how we're going to go about making picks and, looking at it.
Is your inclination, Mike, to just bet over under props for the season totals? Or do you look at things like who's going to be the likely MVP? I see there's action being taken, of course, on possible Cy Young winners, home run leaders, things like that.
I think with the injury bug that seems to happen in all sports, and you get the, that old management plays, where a player might be nicked and might not play. So I think the positive in that, I kind of would more or less stay away. I would kind of do my research through the preseason, find a young player I think could reach stardom, a guy who's on his way up. I think those are the kind of players you want to look for. But as far as preseason, I am a preseason type, pick wins and divisions. And, I have a couple in mind that, I'll share with you right now. I kind of getting to the two divisions that Glenn brought up that are going to be fun and are kind of, you're a lot in question, the two central divisions. So I'm going to look at the AL Central and go after the Detroit Tigers, who Glenn mentioned that could be on the rise. I think they're a young team. I think they played very well in September. I think Torkelson is a real hitter. I think their pitching, should get better. And in these young teams, so I'm looking at over 80.5 Detroit as a play that I will make. And I think a 3-1 shot in the division is also a possibility. When we look at divisions that could be open for grabs, I think the Centrals are wide open where, you might see a team coming from the bottom and move their way up. I'm also a kind of strong, not so much in baseball, leading to other sports, looking at teams at the bottom. I think there's always a chance to switch on as teams, get younger, better, and make acquisitions. Baseball is more or less people sell off at certain times and people gain. But if one of those teams gets something going and they're staying healthy and they're, 2 or 3 games over 500 and, only have 5 or 6 games at the All-Star break, you see a lot of those runs happen. So I kind of look at the teams that are divisions that are a little bit more wide open to see things like that occur.
How much do you factor into any of your preseason wagers? Who's in the front office and what kind of track record and reputation they have for making adjustments during the season? We had an example last year here in South Florida where the Miami Marlins had Kim Ng, a relatively new front office person, and she made a bunch of moves before the season the previous year that you thought were atrocious. And you're thinking either this woman is hell-bent on self-sabotage or she's not a very good general manager. And then she comes up as the team was surprisingly in contention for a postseason berth, which they eventually nailed down, and makes 2 of the more shrewd acquisitions around the trade deadline. Guys like Berger and a couple of others, Bell, who made a tremendous difference in their pennant drive, and they eventually did get into the playoff race and found a spot there, getting eliminated by the Phillies in the first round. But you would have thought she was a candidate for executive of the year. How much of a factor is that in your betting equations and mathematical permutations? Who's in the front office with these teams and who can you trust?
A little bit, but I think I more watch as the season progresses. And then we see comments, and then we see moves that are made, and then how they defend them and a reaction. So I really think that's kind of more where I look at than basically saying, hey, they hired the wrong GM and, this guy's going to make a lot of deals. I don't know how to react. So I don't take a lot into that, but I do factor it in at some point, but more toward the after the All-Star break. I get more into how teams made their transitions, what the reaction is on the microphone with a couple interviews with players, how they feel like, oh, this guy doesn't seem too happy with what kind of the moves make, a veteran player that might get disenchanted, or if they make a trade with a good locker room guy. I know in other sports that's really important, but if you have a guy who seems to everybody like, and then all of a sudden he goes and now no one knows what happens, I'll look to go against teams of that, and especially that initial week or two after the trade deadline where someone gets moved, that a team might be trying to understand why we did that.
Last year, about mid-season, I'm in Atlantic City. You'll find that surprising that I was in some gambling emporium. And I got a call from somebody, and they actually did Zelda money, which is now one of my preconditions for making bets for other people, because you can actually send the cash there. That's right. And not that I didn't trust this person, but I felt a lot better about it if I didn't have to lay out my own 100. And she's from Pittsburgh, and wanted me to bet $100 on the Pittsburgh Pirates to win the World Series. Now, this was at a time where the Pirates were in the throes of a woeful slump. They had been in contention surprisingly early in the season. And you see this many times where some team that's a complete surprise, they get off to a decent start in the first 35, 40 games. But they're destined to fall apart, which it appeared that was going to be the case with the Pirates last year. And so it became one of those situations where when I went to the window, that they actually handed me a pamphlet about the dangers of gambling. and then the clerk calls, hey, Lou, I got somebody who wants to put 100 on the Pirates here. So I'm thinking I should book this bet, but I know with my luck, it'll be one of those situations where the Pirates somehow miraculously win the World Series, and now I'm going to owe this woman $15,000 on her $100 bet. The Pirates are an interesting and a curious entity this year because I believe their over/under total is relatively tepid. Let me get the number here: 72 and a hook this year, 72 and a hook. And I have somebody that I consider to be very insightful in these sort of things saying, go ahead and take the over with the Pirates this year. This guy's been hitting very consistently on team totals. This is his best bet of the season. The Pirates, 72 and a half over. Any thought on the Pittsburgh Pirates?
Interesting take. So what I look at is I will try to find some team that is predicted to be a basement dweller that might steal a division. I think Arizona could have been in that category last year. So you look at that and you say, oh, someone's going to happen. Now the odds are 15, you might get 10, 12, 15 in one division. You get 1 out of 6, you're good. So you try to find that. So there's the Pirates sitting in a division that we're not sure what's going to happen. Free agents could get moved. Your previous guest said, oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen in these divisions. Why not? Look at them. And one of my other fun things in a division like this, if I'm going to bet multiple bets on games, is I like to take the over 80 guy, 80 and a half. Teams are going to be 500 better that they project over to go under, and take the low team to go over. So basically what it is, you're going to play all these games, right? They're all going to come out. You might have to take 20 teams, but you're kind of thinking, does this team have a possibility? I might not even like it, but have a possibility. But the mathematic equation will say they're going to play every game. And if you get a team that gets a little hot early, you might only need 30 out of 80 at the end of the season just to get close. And I think that's kind of what I look at. So I'll always like the little underdog team. And you'll see as I project through the season how I kind of like to take a plus side a little bit. And I'll look at the Pirates and say, yeah, why not go over? At a division when no one looks like there's any kind of, major, team that's going to come out and say, I'm going to grab hold of this division early. Why not go to Pirates over? I'd say so.
All right. Do you have a best bet, something that is like your goal play of the century that you want to put out there for the people?
American League East. Let's look at the American League East. So everybody loves the Yankees. A lot of people I've talked to, people like the Toronto Blue Jays, and Rays have been good for a while. Well, the Orioles came up and stopped and took the division. They've won 101 games. Bring in another starter like Corbin Burns. They look like they're just on the rise. Young players are going to get better. And the total is 90 and a half. So the question is, does Louis the Lip know more than me and say there's a reason why it's 90 and a half? Or does it mean, do I think they can get close to that 101 again? I'm going to go a little more toward the 101. I'm going to not only do that and take over 90 and a half, I'm going to look at say, all right, let's take the East. I'm the second runner in the East, right, at plus 150. Now I'm going to go, let's go to the pennant. So my prediction here is the Orioles get to the World Series. That would be something I would do and go all three ways. So you take the bigger bet on the over wins. You hope you get the division. You take a nice bet on that, a lesser. So you go big on the over 90 and a half because you can still lose the division over 90 and a half winning. You get the second level bet is the division winner. And then the third level bet's going to be the pennant.
Sounds good, yeah.
So that would be my kind of strategy. If you're going to focus in on one team and maximize it, go high on division win, the wins. Secondly, be the division, and then thirdly, be the pennant.
Louis is in stone agreement, and you know what? He can't believe that you also know Louis the Lipschitz, who's infamous for welching on bets, but demanding a collection if you happen to be, as is often the case, in the losing position. Louis, you got anything you want to tout for the baseball season? You haven't got your baseball thinking cap on yet, huh?
No, I'm letting Glenn and Mike do their thing, and I'm really excited for future conversations as we get closer to the baseball hardball season.
All right, going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have some more prop bets for you. And, of course, what's great about baseball, there's action every night. And keep this in mind, people. I'm sure you're a subscriber to this theory. They send a taxi cab for guys that are betting games straight up, and they send a limousine for people that are playing parlays. So be careful out there. You want to maximize your chance to make some money.
Thing to that, if I can, real quick, Jeff. One of the things that you start off a season is Vegas, everybody, opening day baseball. You just finished the football season. We're looking for something to turn our pages to. We all think that the baseball advantage is helping the player. For years, it's been this way. Well, do you jump out right off the bat? I've been notoriously done that, struggled sometimes, had some success. I'm going to take a little page and wait. We're going to play a little bit less plays and a little bit more effectiveness and kind of watch how the season unfolds the first 2 weeks and then really dig in. So that's going to be my strategy this year. We'll give you games as the season comes on early on and maybe one or two. And then once we get a feel, we'll get open discussion and we'll go right at it. I think we're going to have a lot of success.
All right, we're touching on the Katy Perry inside information story, top of the show. So time to reveal the inside information that I have. This comes from what I think is a very credible and reliable source, somebody that is so loyal and dedicated to the organization that I can't imagine that they would ever think of them in a negative light. If they did, they would be unlikely to share that information and or that opinion with anybody outside of maybe their immediate family, and even the wife and children might have trouble extracting this information from this particular individual. And I was told in all good faith that as you look at the Miami Marlins at 78 wins, go under, ladies and gentlemen, or be buried in an avalanche of debt because they're going to be horrible this year. They're already going to be without Jorge Soler, who was a huge catalyst in any success they had. They had tremendous luck last year in winning one-run games. You could say, well, it's luck. Maybe it's by design. Skip Schumacher came in. He did a nice job. We were big fans of Don Mattingly. He had an horrendous record in one-run games the previous year. They were the worst in the league. They went from being that to being, I believe, they finished up the best in the league in win-loss totals in one-run games. Huge factor last year. I think they're going to lose a lot of that. They don't have Sandy Alcantara. They didn't really get much from him last year, but they don't have the benefit of him coming back. They had traded Pablo Lopez, who was their number 2 starter. He had a big year, Cy Young contender with the Minnesota Twins last year. I don't know that they have the ability to make up for this. The word on the street is everybody was available for trade bait, including Louis Arise, who was spectacular last season and a real catalyst for all the success that they had in making the postseason. It is going to be a disaster. They're going to be selling by the time they get around to the trade deadline, if not sooner. And the Marlins, 78 wins, which looks like a pretty easy number to achieve for a team that was in the postseason last year. A disaster. My friends, just send it in on the under, and you will have a very nice year watching the Marlins lose game after game after game after game. That's our inside story for the preseason. Mike, always a pleasure. Look forward to getting your selections all throughout the regular season in Major League Baseball once that gets underway. Are you insane enough to bet preseason games at all?
Oh,
because Lubie loves it.
Maybe in attendance. In attendance for sure I will. But,
attendance over unders, yeah. Got a nice crowd here in Jupiter tonight. Looks like 13,106, right? So you know the announcer was betting the same thing.
Who is he on tonight?
So blue skies and great day for baseball. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun all season long here on Bags Are Juiced. Lubie, always a pleasure, my man. I know he'll get more deeply into it. He gets very opinionated about baseball once the regular season gets underway. For Lubie, Mike Jones, and our good friend Glenn Geffner is going to be with us all throughout the season. I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks so much, people, for tuning in to Bags Are Juiced.